Bitwig is known for having amazing devices, modulation options, and many different effects. One of the effect groups I like the most are the distortions. So let's start with saturation. This seems to be the simplest one as it looks like a wave shaping clipper. Similarly to those effects, X represents the input and Y represents the output. So when the line is 45 degrees, we won't have any change, but the louder the sound, more clipping distortion we will introduce. Basically, the saturator is going to force the signal to take this shape, which is easier to visualize with a sine wave. Of course, every other sound is more complex than sine wave, but this is the basic idea on how saturation works. The drive is the amount of incoming signal, and this low-pass filter is applied only on the saturated sound. So we have controls for the quiet and for the loud parts of a sound. If we use a snare with a big tail, we can understand this better. The quiet is pretty similar on how an expander works. If we increase it with the lower knob, the gain of the quietest parts of the sound will be driven and saturated, and the knob on the top is going to set a threshold. The knee will make it softer, saturating different levels, making the curve steeper and the saturation harder. The load parts work similarly, but as a clipper, the knee will make it softer or harder, and if we decrease the upper knob, the clipping will happen earlier in terms of gain. At the bottom we have the ratio that will make distortion harder, and we can even go in negative values to get a shape like this. It will saturate the louder signals even more while changing the gain relation. Now, what's really unique about this device is that you can actually affect the loud saturation differently for the positive or negative part of a waveform. So if you look on the saturator, on this little part right here, we have the positive and negative values of a wave. Yellow is positive and orange is negative. For this other visualizer is the same, just that right now the positive is overlaying the negative. Any of these parameters, we are going to set an offset between the positive and the negative values. If we take the knee knob to the right, we will make the knee of the positive values harder. With these other settings, it gives us a shape like this, which is pretty similar to the one that's showing on the oscilloscope. So now the waveform is not symmetrical. This will give us unique kind of distortions. The next one is distortion. This one kinda emulates a distortion circuit as it has controls for the slew and the DC. Both will squash the signal in their own way. The slew will squash the sound by decreasing its level, and the DC will introduce subtle harmonics when increased. The drive is of course the amount of signal we are feeding the circuit with. Finally, the symmetry will add harmonics that are not present on the distorted final sound. Now, to shape the sound even further, we have a pre-distortion EQ and a post-distortion filter. The pre-EQ is just a peak that will let us emphasize desired frequencies. Then the post-distortion cuts are a low-pass and a high-pass filter that are applied to the final distorted sound. Pretty straightforward, but let's get a bit more complex and let's check Bitwig's Bit Crusher. Now, saying that's only a bit crusher is a giant understatement. This plugin actually have 4 parts: the clock, the gate, the shape, and quantize. Simply put, the clock is a sample mangler, where the frequency or sample rate will give you that sweet downsampler effect. The jitter will add some randomness to the frequency, and the chance will select samples at random. At 100% we have this whole sound, but if we decrease it, we will get less samples. The gate is pretty straightforward. It's a gate. That means that anything below the selected value won't make any sound. On shape we have many options, but it's very easy to understand. First, these 3 icons right here will make it so we only listen to the positive value of any wave shape, or make it so the negative values are transformed into positive values. This will obviously distort the whole sound. Then we have different clipping modes. Soft and hard are what you suspect, pretty similar to a saturator or a clipper. In fact, you can create a hard clipper with this device by using only this section. We also have fold and wrap. These ones will rectify or clip the polarity of anything that goes beyond the clipping point. Finally, Quantize will, well, quantize the waveform depending on the resolution. Here is based on a noise floor, but it will basically apply an advanced bit crushing effect. We have different quantization modes, and this little button right here will activate the anti-aliasing so we don't have undesired harmonics. The last one is the amp, which is an amp emulation with input and output controls, different circuit emulations, and even a cabinet convolution response and coloration sections where you can edit the three-dimensional measurements of the cabinet. So yeah, this is pretty advanced and deep, and it's made to be as close as possible as a hardware unit. The visualizer gives you the spectrum for the input and output of the amplification section. Here you can EQ the input and the output separately by cutting the lows, the highs, and despite showing an M like in the middle, you can boost a peak on any point from 8 Hz to 20 kHz. On the top we have a class selector. This will change what type of circuit it's emulating. We have transistors, I think analog is tube, and honestly for the others I'm not really sure. The bias will change the symmetry of the clipping stage, a sag will model the response of tubes and large transients. So that's basically the amplification part. Here we have the cabinet response options. We can set the width, the height, and the depth. So we don't have an impulse response selector with set measurements. We actually can build our own. Not only that, we can go from 3 centimeters to 3 meters. We also can add more reflection, as this is something physical that produces a reflection. We can make it resonate even more. Here at the top we can flip the phase if the cabinet is introducing phase issues. And finally, here at the bottom we have the color knob. We can go up to 100% and choose 8 different types of color, which honestly I'm not sure which type of cabinet they are. Finally, this plugin is set to stereo by default, but if you put it on mono, the signal will become mono. So I hope this video helps you understand better the distortion effects from Bitwig. They are really nice. So now go and experiment with everything you have. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel and give a big thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.